So, Mark, we are joined by no less than Ed Conway. Hi, Ed.
Very exciting. Welcome.
Sky News economic guru.
I came to Washington to see what this room was like.
No, you didn't. You came to plug your book.
Yeah, I'm just selling. I'm selling my book. I'm going to whatever country, and selling my book as much as possible.
Yeah, my admission is that I have bought your book twice for two presents, but I haven't yet read it. So
Okay, you're that person.
yeah, I am. Very annoying.
I heard about you. My publisher would tell you.
I'm James Matthews.
And I'm Mark Stone.
And I'm Ed Conway.
And on day 96 of Trump 100, could Trump be backing down from his trade war with China?
But first, has President Trump run out of patience with Vladimir Putin? Vladimir, stop. That was Donald Trump's message to the Russian president on Thursday morning. His post on Truth Social, it came after a deadly Russian strike on Kyiv on Wednesday night. Trump said he wasn't happy with the Russian strikes, and he called them not necessary and very bad timing.
It was telling, certainly, that he called him Vladimir, not Putin. I can't remember a time when Trump has referred to Zelensky as Vladimir. But anyway, it was hard to tell from that social media post if it was a plea or a command from Trump to Vladimir. But in the Oval Office on Thursday lunchtime during a meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister, the President, Donald Trump, made his frustration pretty clear.
What is your level of frustration with President Putin
I didn't like
at this
last
point?
night. I wasn't happy with it. And it's, what he said. I assume that's what you mean.
Sorry.
Yeah.
If
I
the
assume.
bombs keep falling, will you consider additional sanctions toward Russia, or what will you do if President Putin...
I'd rather answer that question in a week. I want to see if we can have a deal. No reason to answer it now, but I won't be happy. Let me put it that way. Things will happen.
Mr. President, why are you not putting more pressure on Russia? I know a lot of Europeans...
Putting a lot of pressure. You don't know what pressure I'm putting on Russia.
Yeah, Donald Trump, he said a few things across a couple of news conferences today, actually. Insisted the US was putting a lot of pressure on Russia, said he thinks Putin wants to make a deal. On Crimea, he said it would be very difficult for Ukraine to give it back. And he was asked, did he have a deadline for a peace deal? Now, first of all, he said he did, but he wouldn't say what it was. Later, he was asked, would he consider additional sanctions on Russia? His reply was, I'd rather answer that question in a week. I want to see if we have a deal. I wonder if that was a hint to his timetable.
Yeah, and I wonder if his timetable is next Tuesday, because that is 100 days. He'd like to have been able to say he's solved Gaza, he's solved Ukraine. He said he'd do that in a day, and that he's got every world nation to capitulate on trade and on Ukraine. What the deal might look like, it remains very unclear. He was asked by a journalist in the Oval Office what Russia would be giving up to secure peace, and this was his answer.
What concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war. Stopping taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
Ed, minerals are a big part of this story, this mineral deal, which Trump actually said would be signed today. It's not been.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be here to talk about that actually today. We've talked about it quite a bit. In fact, we did another podcast on it. It's been a roller coaster of understanding about what's actually going on with this minerals deal because, in a way, in some senses, it looks like it's kind of moderately positive for Ukraine. It's not like Ukraine has an extraordinary amount of minerals, but they've got some.
Yeah.
It locks America into Ukraine potentially for a long time. But in other respects, a lot of people think it looks quite kind of colonial. The terms have seem like they're quite onerous.
But at one stage, it was the rare earths deal, your reporting suggested that there aren't actually that many rare earths in Ukraine.
Well, there aren't. There are more rare earths in America.
Yeah, and I mean, in simple terms, the way Trump sees it is that by buying into Ukraine's minerals, that in and of itself is a security guarantee because, as he said a number of times, there will be Americans on the ground in Ukraine, and we have a stake in Ukraine's future. Of course, the problem with that is that there were Americans on the ground when Putin invaded Ukraine a few years ago, and they just left. Yeah, I don't really think it is the security guarantee that Zelensky is after and that Europe is after.
No, I suppose it's if you can have some economic kind of regeneration, because the interesting thing is when you're looking at where those minerals are, most of them are within that kind of occupied area, particularly kind of the lithium, particularly some of the rare earths. So if you can kind of regenerate those areas, then there's a kind of virtuous circle theoretically. But I think a lot. So do you remember that film Avatar? It was all about unobtainium. The idea that there was this mysterious metal that no one quite understood, but it was going to be the solution to something. I feel like rare earths in Ukraine is kind of like Trump's unobtainium. We need to get those rare earths. We don't quite know what they do. We don't know what they're for. We don't know where they are. But let's just get the unobtainium, and that's going to solve everything.
Okay, but here's the irony of that. The concession that Trump is saying Putin is giving effectively is that he's not getting the whole country. He's only getting the part that he already occupies in the east, where you say most of the rare earths are. I don't really understand how the rare earths or minerals deal works if most of the minerals are actually in the part of the country that Putin currently occupies. Just to remind people of the deal that appears to have been leaked, it's actually very similar to something that J.D. Vance, the vice president, said many, many months ago when he was only the candidate, that effectively what would happen is America would recognize Crimea as Russia. That might be something that Zelensky and the Ukrainians could have accepted, but it goes further than that, because the deal also says that the front line would effectively be frozen, and all the land to the east of that front line would become de facto Russia. So you could kind of see why Putin might think, actually, this is a pretty good deal, and you can certainly see why Zelensky would say it's a really awful deal. It's not a deal.
But also, I think that Truth Social post today, Vladimir STOP, addressing the Russian president in the style of a father telling his son to tidy his room. There was a time when US presidents wanting to bring Russia to heel would have been robust, belligerent, wouldn't have fired off merely a social media message. And, for so long we've been talking about Trump around Ukraine, this business of peace through strength versus peace through surrender. Well, I think the discussions move far beyond that. The Ukrainians in particular would see Donald Trump putting surrender and nothing less on the table. We seem a long way from what they would have seen as the heady days of US security guarantees.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about tariffs, Ed. I'm really keen to get your views on. Is it your favorite word? It's Trump's.
It is a fascinating thing to discuss.
He's made it interesting.
He's made economics interesting again.
Yeah.
Maybe not in a good way.
So we want to talk about two things: China, but also where you think the UK is on this trade deal, which I think is kind of a misleading term. It's more of an economic deal than it is a full-blown trade deal. China first. They have called on Trump to cancel his 145% tariffs on Chinese goods if he wants to end the trade war. And it is a trade war that has been escalating. China sent back Boeing planes that it ordered from the United States in its latest retaliation over the tariffs.
Trump says that they are actively having discussions, which is news to Beijing, apparently. They have, in fact, their commerce ministry has come back with this retort. Any claims about the progress of China-US trade negotiations are groundless, as trying to catch the wind and have no factual basis. Very Chinese in their retort, but very firm in telling Donald Trump, look, we're not talking. What do you make of it?
And to some extent, it's what Beijing, the impression that Beijing has wanted to give for some time. I remember this back in the first Trump presidency, where they want to project themselves as the sensible kind of party of globalization, that China is the kind of free trade capitalism champion, which is just a bizarre. How bizarre is that? And the fact that China could be trying to take that mantle from the United States is extraordinary. But that's kind of what they're trying to do again. And they are making this point to investors. They're saying, listen, if you want somewhere where it's predictable, where you know whether you can invest, where that you're not going to have crazy tariffs, then
you're not going to have a change. You're not going to have a change of government.
Just certainly not going to have a change of government for however long it is. Isn't that just this kind of strange, perverse world that we find ourselves in at the moment? Having reported on it, there are so many echoes of the Truss experience in the UK. I mean, it's different. There's always differences in economics.
There's differences in politics as well, because with Truss, the UK political system was able to call her out and then stop her
and eject her. Yeah. Whereas that can't happen here. But But I think when you look, I remember very vividly on the afternoon of the mini budget, just looking at those charts, and it was a depressing experience seeing that share prices were down, bond yields were up, um, and the currency was down. And those three things together is really what you don't want, because it suggests that people are pulling money out of the country.
And you see that here.
And you see that here. It's amazing to think that you could say that about the US economy. For 50, 60, 70 years longer, the US dollar has been one of the safe havens. When you're worried about everything else, you buy US treasuries. The fact that the people seem to be turning away from this is not, I don't know if it's an emergency at this point, but definitely you're seeing evidence of it. That is a massive watershed moment for the global economy, which we are living through right now. That's part of the reason why he seems to have rowed back on that.
Listen to tomorrow's episode. We'll find out what happens then.
We don't know at the start of each day what the next turn is going to be in this soap opera. It is very hard, and it takes a long time to build up credibility.
Yeah.
And the US has this extraordinary credibility, partly by dint of being this global superpower, partly by dint of the strength of the economy, partly by dint of, having the US dollar. And if you lose that credibility, then suddenly, just like, like a person, like a family borrowing, if you suddenly don't look like you're as good a bet, then suddenly all the interest rates that you're going to be paying, they're going to be going up. Your credit rating, it kind of deteriorates. And for everyone in this country, life gets more expensive.
Let's talk about the UK. I've had loads of conversations over the past few months with officials here about the prospect of a trade deal, an economic deal, a deal to remove the tariffs, which are currently 10% for everything for the UK and all other countries. Where do you see the trade deal?
I mean, so there's this important distinction, isn't there, between like a grand, what most economists would call a trade deal, which is when you're kind of going through every line item of all the goods you're swapping with each other, and you're saying, okay, we're going to bring down tariffs on agriculture, we're going to raise tariffs there, we're going to look at kind of food standard. That far-reaching kind of a trade deal feels to me like really unlikely. It's the kind of thing that takes years to negotiate, and you're dealing with quite profound, almost cultural differences.
Yeah.
What's our attitude towards food in the UK versus in the US? Those are quite deep-seated things that you can't just suddenly decide overnight. So I'd be amazed if there were that kind of a trade deal.
They're not going for that.
They're not going for that.
They're going for something that will lower the tariffs. So what we understand is that there is a deal on the table. The Brits, like many other countries, I think in the White House they said it's about 15 countries have got deals on the table. The problem, and this relates to so much of Trump world, is actually getting that deal under the nose of Donald Trump and getting him to focus on it. And he's sort of going through them. South Korea today, they said, is very, very close. Maybe next week, Scott Bessent said. But where's the UK in the list? We just don't know, do we?
We're not as big a kind of, then they are more dependent on South Korea, more dependent on Taiwan. Think of all those kind of chips coming in from Taiwan. So I suspect that South Korea is slightly higher up on the list than us.
It's also a good way, a neat way for Trump to isolate China further, to do deals with Japan, with South Korea.
But I mean, I guess it's that question of where is the UK vis-a-vis Europe? Because if the government could say we're much more likely to seize this than Europe, which seems likely, he can show that he is kind of more nimble and able to negotiate than the EU. So I think he would see that as a gain, Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
But it's how do you work within this chaos? I mean, I think the UK has done as good a job as pretty much any other country behind the scenes of trying to have those conversations about how a trade deal can actually happen. But part of the problem with these Trump tariffs is they've just been so broad.
You wrote a piece that said the device you're holding in your hand shows us
Oh, thank you.
how Trump's tariffs could herald one of the most painful episodes in modern times.
But globalization is one of those words, isn't it, James? It's like it's a rubbish word. Like, it's a made up word, and it's people use it to make themselves sound a bit more kind of intelligent than they actually are. But what in practice this is
Hey, mate, it's a living for some of us.
yeah, I know, that's pretty good for me. Every device you use, is confected of different parts that come from all over the world. It is the smartphones are the obvious example. It's basically everything we use has been around the world, and the components of it have been around the world numerous times. And part of that, which is, that we have, taken apart the process of making something so you can make everything where it's cheapest to make it, is the explanation for why we have cheap stuff and why you could just order something from wherever it might be and it turns up the next day on your doorstep and it's pretty cheap. that is globalization. It is the way the modern economy works. And if you are suddenly making it far more difficult to move that, I don't know, the semiconductor that goes into the phone, and you're making it more expensive, then that just challenges the entire nature of the way the world economy works. And that's why people, I think, are so concerned about tariffs and about the idea specifically of a trade war. Because if everyone is putting these barriers up, then you can't do that anymore. And you have to start making everything in one country, which is going to be so much more expensive than it would have been in the past. So it's much more profound than just this question of, is the US going to have tariffs? It's the whole nature of how we make stuff and how things turn up on our doorsteps.
But Ed, you do have a life beyond writing books and economics
Well, I mean,
because you are a DJ.
oh, I used to be a DJ.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
you know
Well,
this.
tell us about
Well, when I was younger, I used to do a bit of DJing, but this is before I had children or much of a career, really.
what kind of music? Records.
Dance music,
Yeah?
like, yeah, kind of it's like techno.
Oh right. Oh yeah. I don't screw your face up. I'm with you.
Familiar with
That's
the
my
acronyms?
Well, I've heard of it.
There's a nice Venn diagram of people who like economics.
There's always a diagram.
People who like chart, and people who like dance music, and there's
just you
there's
and
a
me.
few people. There's me and maybe one other person,
Right in the sweet
and we're
spot.
very happy.
Yeah. Cool and clever. Ed Conway. Ed, great to have you with us. Many thanks
Thank you for having me here.
for joining us.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, that's it for day 96. Do make sure you follow Trump 100 wherever you're listening and leave us a review, please, while you're there.
Yeah, and as ever, send us your questions. We love getting them. Trump100@sky.uk. That is the email address. We will see you tomorrow for day 97.
Yeah, see you then.
97. Wow.
97.